Welcome to the World According to Christy podcast. This show will motivate you, inspire you, and give you tools to activate your goals and dreams, whether those dreams are entrepreneurial, corporate, or personal.
This episode is sponsored by the Faith to Conquer Fear course, Getting Things Done. Are you a procrastinator? Did you know procrastination is a symptom of fear? If you want to become more aware of your procrastination habits, learn to stop them in their tracks, and learn more productive habits, visit faithtoconquerfear.com/courses to learn more about this powerful self-study program. Hello, and welcome to the World According to Christy podcast. I'm Christy Demetrakis, your host, author of Faith to Conquer Fear, Inspiration to Achieve Your Dreams, and Amazon bestseller, Faith to Conquer Fear, The Journey. I am so excited you are here. If you have been following me for any period of time or listened to my episode 0, you will know that each week I'm going to bring you something a little bit different. Some weeks you'll hear me pontificating. Other weeks you will hear me talk to some of my old friends from my vintage Faith to Conquer Fear and Sell Your Message radio shows. And other weeks I will introduce you to a new friend. And that is exactly what we are doing today. So today I'm talking to Annemarie Cross of Podcasting with Purpose. Annemarie has been dubbed, and I want to get this right, the podcasting queen. I think that's huge, by her clients, colleagues, and podcast guests. Over the years, she's been listed among the top 25 podcasts for entrepreneurs, top 50 podcasts for entrepreneurs, and top 100 small business podcasts worldwide by well-known and respected small business websites, including entrepreneur.com. Combining her love of technology and social media, she's been able to build a business, client base, and support team that is truly global by harnessing the power of social media and online technologies, particularly podcasting, which is what we're talking about today. Annemarie, welcome to the World According to Christy podcast.
Oh, thank you, Christy. It is so good to connect with you.
I am glad to have you here. And what people probably don't know is I've been on your podcast before.
Yes, we have had the opportunity, and it's lovely to be able to speak with you. I know that we had so much fun on our podcast, and my audience loved the content that you shared. So it's an honor to be able to do the same for you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to have you. Well, before we start, I read a little bit of your bio, but tell us a little bit about you and about that lovely accent that we're hearing.
Well, I'm in Melbourne, Australia, and at the moment we are in our second lockdown. So we've got such interesting things happening around the world. But one of the things that many of us are experiencing now, which we're talking about job losses and the economies across the world are kind of struggling. Well, back in 2008, for those of you who can recall, that was when the global financial crisis hit. A colleague and I were in the career industry, and we were so disappointed at the doom and gloom that many of the mainstream media, in fact, all of them, TV, print and radio were talking about the doom and gloom. And we knew that things were difficult. We knew that things were tough. But I'm sure you'd agree, Christy, that what you listen to and what you put your focus and attention on is going to impact your psyche. It's going to impact your mindset. And we knew that job seekers had to change their approach to job search. No longer were there lots of advertisements. Job search was really around tapping into the hidden job market, going and networking, looking for those opportunities, and really just building on some of the skills as time, had to pass. So we started Career Success Radio, had no idea what we were doing, but we knew that we needed to be the voice, or wanted to be the voice of hope and inspiration amongst the doom and gloom. We did that for 2 years. One of the reasons that we split was my colleagues started to get into social media back in the day. That was when Facebook and Twitter and a lot of those social media platforms that we now love to use were starting. He wanted to focus in that, and I started working more with entrepreneurs who started to think, I'm going to start working in my own business. But another reason was we struggled to monetize it. So it's been quite a journey over the last 10 to 12 years, and kind of finding the systems that would enable me to do that. And people started calling me the podcasting queen, which I laughed out loud the first time someone said that to me, and I thought, oh yeah, whatever. And then when I decided, you know what, I'm really going to hone in and start to specialize in that. I've got some background, I've got some knowledge to share. And I thought, yeah, that's got a bit of something. And so I embraced the title and kind of been known that ever since. Someone once asked me, Christy, how do you become the queen of anything? And I said, well, I've never been asked that, but really find something that you love doing and just do it. And if it's something that you're quite innately good at, it'll show. And if you do it day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, you'll just continue to hone that. And people will often recognize in you that thing, you know, and start referring to you as that. And it actually happened to a client of mine when I shared that story. She said, hey, I've noticed a few people have started to call me the money lady, and she was a spending planner, so helping people with their budgets. And so she embraced that title. So often your audience will see things in you and start to refer to you as certain things. So that's things that you should start observing, because your version of the podcasting queen may just be out there.
I love it. And you said something very important. If you do something every day, year after year, you just keep getting better at it, that equity becomes yours. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, because you even said early on, you all had trouble monetizing. So a lot of people, they have this vision, this thing they really want to do, but if they don't see immediate results, they go, this must be a bad idea. Let me shift to something else. And so what I love about it is since 2008, that's been your practice, right? That's your skill, that's your thing. And hence the title. So I love it. I love it.
You know what actually ended up happening, Christy? And I think when we interviewed, I had you on my podcast, Women in Leadership. What a lot of people don't know about that particular podcast was I started that podcast after my worst business failure ever. And after that happened, it really just took the wind out of me, and I really couldn't write. And I'm a creator, content creator, love creating training programs and so forth. But I knew I needed to continue to do something to get, to remain connected with my community. And I thought, you know what, I can ask questions. So I thought, I'm going to go out and interview other women leaders in business, and find out their war stories to, inspire me as I'm going through my loss and grief, so to speak. 3 episodes in, I secured 2 4-figure clients. And it wasn't until a little bit later I thought, man, if I could do that accidentally, imagine what was possible if I tracked what had to be in place, what needed to happen for them to not know who I was, Google brain consultant and business consultant, find my website, listen to 3 episodes, and then decide Annemarie's the person I want to work with. And so I say, no, a book later, programs later, I've kind of been able to capture that and do that intentionally. Now teach my clients the same. And so the lesson in that is that your biggest challenge that you've overcome may just be something that you can put together, systematize, and teach others as part of your expertise.
And I think that is so true, because my whole faith to conquer fear message, which I've trademarked, that whole message came out of fear. Right. And it was kind of by accident, really. I love to tell people, when I wrote my first book, which was Faith to Conquer Fear, Inspiration to Achieve Your Dreams, I said, I would love to tell you I had some sexy reason, like God, said, writeth this booketh, Christy. But that wasn't it. Look, for the first book. Now, the second book, but for the first book, it was literally, I needed something to sell. I knew I wanted to be a speaker. And I said, what great speaker doesn't have backroom product to sell? And I wrote the book. But what it would have made sense at the time was that I would have written a book on public speaking training, because that's what my company had been established on. And I still do that. But my book was very faith-based, and it was fear. It was faith and fear. And when I wrote that book and I reread it, because you should reread your own books. Because I read my books, I'm like, oh, that's pretty good.
That's right. Where did that come from?
Okay, I'm going to digress, but I'm going to come back because I'll get off track. But so when I wrote that first book and I reread it, I went, oh my God, I'm glad that other people are loving it and they're getting a lot out of it, but I realized I really wrote the book for myself. And that really prompted my purpose. And, you know, the rest is history. It's the programs, it's the radio shows, it's all those things that come from that experience. So I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Yeah. I love that you said that, because how often do we discredit our journey? Or what ends up happening is some of the things that we've overcome, we don't want to talk about it because we think, oh, no one else will really experience that. Or even the topic of failure. I mean, I remember being interviewed by one of my colleagues. I was happy to share because I thought if I could share some of the insights and learnings that would save someone from having to to avoid that heartache. And I remember a gentleman reaching out to me and said, you're brave for sharing that. I didn't think I was brave. I just wanted to be able to share. But sometimes we can feel shame. You know, maybe in your instance, I didn't want anyone to have anyone know that I was fearful. But we recognize that there are so many other people that are experiencing the same thing. And, you know, often, and this is something else that I'll say to people, they may say, well, so many others are talking in that particular topic. Yes, but they don't have your journey. They don't have your characteristics, your approach, your mannerisms. And your ideal client, and many ideal clients, are waiting for you because you are the person who is going to lead them through, you know, out of that valley onto the mountain. And by not sharing your story, they're going to remain stuck.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. You know, it's interesting. A lot of my public speaking coaching clients come from Thumbtack, this platform called Thumbtack. I don't know if that's in Australia or not.
No, I haven't heard of it. No.
But it's one of those sites where you go to find services. Like you put in your, hey, I'm looking for a painter, I'm looking for whatever. And I always find it so interesting, and I'm always humbled when people choose me, right? Because if you Google public speaking coach, I will typically come up first. I'm one of the highest rated. I'm also one of the most expensive on Thumbtack, but people will always tell me, and this is something you can't market, right? I'm like, how do I market that? But they always say, something told me to pick you. Something told me to pick you. And there's lots of options, and there's lots of less expensive options. So when people come and they say, I don't know exactly what it is, but I know I need you. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing. And I often will pray and say, God, I want you to give me something unique, something different. You know, I'm always asking, give me something that's never been done before, that's going to make bazillions of dollars, but that's never been done before. And you raised such a great point. The uniqueness is us. What we bring to the party is unique. And you could say the same message that I say, but because of how I deliver it, it'll resonate. I mean, we could say the exact same words, or studies have been done. You say the exact same thing, but it's something about the way you deliver it that speaks to the heart of that particular person.
Yeah, it does.
Wow.
Yeah. And you know, when you got the Holy Spirit and the Lord on your marketing team, man, can't get any better than that, can you?
You know, and I started to get tickled now. Initially, I was like, oh, that's so nice. And now I just wait for it. I'm like, here it comes. I know what they're going to say. And like, I looked through all these names, and I literally had a gentleman call me last night, and when we had a time scheduled, and he wanted to talk about public speaking and coaching. And I said, well, hey, how did you come to me? I always ask that question, like, how did you come to me? And he says, well, one of my colleagues said I needed, to hone my skills in public speaking. And she went through and she picked you out of 5 people. And she said, here's the person for you to talk to. This is your person. Yeah. I said, amazing. So you don't know anything about me? He said, nope, but she does. I said, all right.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things. But hey, we are supposed to be talking about podcasting. Podcasting is all the rage right now, especially. It's been popular, but it's especially popular now, especially with COVID. This is just not just another way, but it's a way for people to really engage. I restarted my podcast in the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
So why is now the best time for businesses specifically to do a podcast?
Well, now's a really good time, and it's always been a good time. People often ask me, when should I start a podcast? We should have started it probably a few years ago, but the second best time is to start now. I think that's because people really are looking for that connectedness. And I don't know about, kind of the demographics of the people over in the US, but I know here in Australia, one of the things that we're finding is we're turning away from mainstream media because of the bombardment of advertisements. Our time is precious. And for me now, if I'm even television, I don't really watch the news. I'm very mindful, particularly at the moment, of what I'm focusing on. But when listeners find out that there's these niched topics, resources, podcasts that they can listen to that are not bombarded with ads, then that is something that really is what's the word I'm looking for? It's something that they really want to access. And so, as a business, what other way that you have someone who subscribes to your podcast because they want to listen to you and the topic. And one of the things that I always say, when you get the right distinguishing message and something that no one else can really talk about because your message is distinguishable, it's uncopyable and irresistible, then they come for the topic and they'll return for the host using all of the things that we spoke about before. I've used a lot of different social media platforms, including, of course, podcasting, but I've never found a medium that engages so deeply. And I've had people that I've just met who've listened to one or two episodes and then they've said, I'm going to binge listen to the whole, to the entire podcast. And Women in Leadership, when I had 36 episodes at the time, I'm thinking, well, that's a lot of hours that this person was going to spend with me. She did that initially because she wanted to listen to a couple of episodes because I'd asked her to share her story, but she binge listened and then she became a guest and then she became a VIP client. Mm-hmm. I've never really had anything like that coming through different mediums. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because of that consistency and that rapport that you build with a podcast when you do it correctly.
Yeah. What are some of the most common questions you get asked when people are considering starting a podcast? Because it seems like a cool thing to do, and then you realize, oh shoot, I have to do this every week, or I have to create content every week, or I have to have guests every week, or whatever the frequency is.
Yeah, well, the first question I often get asked, other than, how do I get started, is what technology do I need? And I've kind of coined a phrase that says, concern yourself with the message rather than the make and model of microphone, because you cannot edit and mix compelling content from fluff and banter and content that converts. And I'm talking about content that nurtures those listeners into leads and then inquiries and ultimately paying customers. And so often what I find, and all of the things that I share now are mistakes that I made. And one of the reasons I closed down my award-winning podcast, the one that you mentioned, listed this and that and the other, I closed that down because my message got lost in the noise of my own podcast. And I realized that I really needed to hone in and niche, which is why I started Industry Thought Leader podcast, because I really wanted to work with specialists who want to be seen as that trusted authority. So really, and think about the end in mind. And I've spoken to so many people who said, well, I've just got a microphone and I'm just going to create content. But if you haven't clearly defined your message and thought about, well, what do I want to position myself as? And what am I ultimately going to monetize so that you can seed and lead, particularly those people in your audience who are ready to make that decision, who are ready to take that next step, then you won't have this beautiful resource that continues to nurture those leads. And so often what will happen is people will start off and then their audience will shift or their message will shift. And I've even had colleagues who have had to close down podcasts that were very successful from a number, listenership and downloads, millions, but they weren't able to monetize it because it wasn't positioned to monetize in their area of specialty. Two people had come together and just started the show, which obviously really made an impact for listenership, but the listeners weren't buying customers for their product or services. Does that make sense?
No, it does make sense. So you mentioned a couple of things, obviously, shutting down something very successful because it was a shift from what it didn't really embrace your message. But at what point are you recommending that businesses who have maybe two different types of products have two different podcasts if they choose to go the podcasting route?
Great question. And this is where you'd want to have a look and see, okay, so if you were a business, is there a way that there is an umbrella or a bridge, if you will, or an umbrella statement that ties it together so that you can have one podcast and maybe have two different focuses, but under that same umbrella? And so if you think back to the career industry, when we're often told to niche, aren't we? But I never wanted a niche in a specific area. I mean, I loved writing resumes, loved writing, LinkedIn bios, loved interview coaching, career coaching, all of those different things. I just did not want to become known as a specialist in the one area. Mm-hmm. So what I did is I created an umbrella statement, which was very outcome focused: get noticed, get hired, get paid what you are worth. Mm-hmm. And so I use that as a way because my ideal clients wanted to do that. And so then if they wanted a resume or interview coaching, I was able to funnel them into the right product. So I think when you're with your message, you've got to have that clear message. Similarly with, say, my podcast. I mean, my podcasting services, it's not just a podcast, because that's a medium. I say to people, if your message, because often people will look to podcasts as a way to build their reach because they feel invisible. That's what a lot of my clients are. I'm feeling invisible. I don't know why, because I really do have a level of expertise, and they do, but not enough people know about them. So they think that a podcast is going to fix the problem. But I say to them, well, what's your message doing? How are you marketing yourself? Are you marketing yourself? Absolutely. They're doing everything they know is possible. And I say to them, well, you're not yet ready to launch a podcast, because your podcast is only going to amplify the message, which currently is not working, which means your podcast is going to blast that out to more people. So take the time, isn't it? And hone your message first, and then know where are you leading these people to. Because that mistake that I mentioned to you with the 3-part podcast that were out there, I wasn't being interviewed, I was interviewing guests. Well, I'm using that principle. So episode 0 you mentioned is really important, but the first 3 episodes becomes what I call your thought leadership podcast series. And that is where you take your ideal clients through the know, like, and trust, and through the buyer's journey. So there's a whole kind of system and format that we teach, but that 3-part series becomes your opt-in. So that at the end of every podcast episode, for those people who are ready, you might say something like, now, by the way, if you're looking to, and again, your tagline, then I've created a free gift for you. It's my 3-part podcast series. And by the way, I've created a quiz as well, so that you can identify exactly where the gaps are and where you need to work. My gift to you, here's how you can access it. So that call to action gets people who've just listened to the podcast to go, oh, I need that. I love that, Christy. And off they go. They then become part of that opt-in where you can nurture them. And so I never really did that, but I do that now intentionally, and we get that set up for all of our customers. So in that aspect, getting back to your original question, if you find that you've got an umbrella statement, but you've got 2 separate offerings that people of your audience maybe will create 2 different funnels, 2 different aspects of where they would go, and say, by the way, if you're here, for me, I might say, if you're here because your message isn't working and you're not really clear on your brand, go and sign up and get access to my personal branding strategies and things that you need to do. And by the way, if you're looking to launch a podcast, here is another resource. So you direct people to where they know they're going to get the information that that's going to best support them. So yeah, that would probably be a suggestion that I would have people look at before they kind of decide, because you know what it's like. You don't want to stretch yourself too thin, but if you can create a great audience that could either be one product or service or another, you can tie them together really nicely.
And you said something really important that I don't want to get lost, and then I want to shift to talk about these 2 programs that you mentioned that you offer. But you talked about having good marketing before you start the podcast.
Yes.
That's so funny. It might be accurate and personally relevant. But what do you, so you've said to people, hold off, but what if they've already started the podcast? Yeah,
that is fine. I'm actually working with someone at the moment who, incredible podcast from a production point of view, and what she puts into it absolutely amazing. However, she struggled to really attract her ideal client and monetize that. So what we're doing at the moment is taking a step back, and we're really revisiting where are your unique giftings and strengths and what I call principles. Because you know how I talked about different approaches and mannerisms and the way that you think about certain things. Well, her history and journey has enabled her, and she's a CFO, to bring unique aspects to her audience. So now that we refined that, what we're able to do is create a podcast series. We will be doing this. And so with her existing audience, she's going to invite them to access that, but it's also allowed her to shape her message. So if someone has already started that podcast and it hasn't quite hit the ground, and they realize, well, I can see I really haven't honed in my particular area of expertise, that hope is not lost. You just need to refocus and do that. Not even having to start a whole new podcast, series. For me, I did. Because I just wanted to, I've got a book, Industry Thought Leader. We have Industry Thought Leader Academy. So I knew that the branding was very much going to be positioned that way. And Ambitious Entrepreneur, whilst I still talk to ambitious entrepreneurs, it was kind of a branding vehicle that I knew was fine, but I wanted to go in a different direction. So, yeah.
So
Does that help?
Yeah, no, perfect. So you've talked about, ways that you help clients. So let's be very overt. Tell us about some of the programs that you have in place.
Well, I have my 90-day idea to launch your Thought Leader podcast, where we all work together in a group environment from idea to launch. And that is where we map out the 3-part podcast series, get that created, and then really build the podcast, brand around that for the business. Many of my clients are service-based businesses, but I also have VIP programs for those people who'd rather work with me privately as well. But it really is, building reach with your ideal client, building reputation as that trusted authority, and then ultimately building revenue. One of the things that I say, Christy, is, the way that you're sharing your message at the moment, whether you are sharing a message or whether you are introducing yourself, say at a virtual networking event, or maybe when we get back face-to-face, be in person, if someone can take your name, remove your name out of that message and replace it with theirs and continue to share that message, and it kind of relates to what they do too, because it kind of shares a little bit about their story, it means that you haven't gone deep enough to really distinguish, what's quite unique about my story and journey, so that someone cannot do that because it doesn't depict their pathway and challenges that have overcome. And so when you are able to distinguish that message, that's when you become uncopyable, and then you can create that IP around what you've done, and incorporate that into your message. And often it becomes the principles, and those principles are those, what I call those signature slogans and sayings, which only you share because it's come from part of your journey. And those are the things that are lasting. People remember that, and they almost, you could call them Christyisms, where only Christy says that because, that's just part of her story. And then once that happens, that's when you become irresistible to your ideal clients.
I love it. I love it. Well, Annemarie, how do people contact you?
So I'll walk my talk and just share with people. I have a podcast series too, my gift. So if people are struggling and they want to find out how they can position themselves as thought leaders in their industry, all they need to go to is annemarie.cross.com/podcast series. And they get the 3-part podcast series. There's a checklist. There's some videos there as well to support them. And I share more about that 3-part podcast series and what they can start doing to help design and develop theirs too, if that's something that they're interested in.
Awesome. Well, Annemarie, I knew this was going to be a great conversation. It's so good to see you again. We've only ever seen each other virtually, so this is...
I know. It's been great. Thank you so much, Christy.
You are so welcome. So thank you. And thank you all for listening to the World According to Christy podcast. I'm here every week. So make sure that you subscribe so you'll get the latest updates for when I am going on air again. I'm doing what I love. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Do you like free resources? Tools that will help you accomplish stuff? I have great resources for you to download for free. Visit faithtoconquerfear.com. You can download free chapters of my books, video series, declaration journals, and more. Visit faithtoconquerfear.com today.
Thank you for listening to the World According to Christy podcast. Remember to subscribe to ensure you receive updates on upcoming episodes. Check out free resources to help you increase your faith, increase your confidence, and conquer your fears at faithtoconquerfear.com.